Welcome back, everybody. Today we're going to be talking about upgrading the steering wheel in your 1999 to 2004 Jeep Grand Cherokee WJ. There was a change in the airbags, so be careful about which one you pull from the salvage yard. Just make sure that you have the right years on there. It's really not going to cost that much, assuming you can get a good deal from your salvage yard. The Overland steering wheel is $25 to $100. I spent $35 on mine. Airbag, $50 to $100, depending upon, again, where you go. It's also not going to take very long, assuming you have everything ready to go, about 20 to 30 minutes for this job. There are quite a few tools that you will need, though. You're going to need 8mm and 13mm socket plus extension, a 21mm socket, 6-sided, half-inch drive, impact rated, an adjustable wrench, and a 2-3 jaw gear puller, which you can buy or you can rent for free at an auto parts store. Now remember, I don't have any special skills, tools, or training. If I can do it, so can you. Here's an overview of how the steering wheel looks right now. The Overland steering wheel has wood trim on it, and to take this off we're going to need to disconnect the battery first. Just need an adjustable wrench and that screwdriver. I went ahead and cleaned up the battery terminals while I was there as well. Now that familiar 8mm socket with an extension, you just reach behind there, and again this is a blind reach, so you can just kind of feel it. Once you wiggle the steering wheel around and get it on there, you can see it coming, or feel it coming off there. Now the airbag on mine, this side, the driver's side, was a little bit tougher, and it required me to use the wrench all the way to the end. I'm not sure why, but it's the first time it'd come off. The one on the passenger side of the steering wheel, as soon as it popped off, I could take off the ratchet part really easily. And to avoid dropping a bolt like I do in every other video, I held my hand underneath. And then you just kind of lean it forward here, and I put it back for a little bit better grip. And then, as you can see in the reverse shot, there's 3 wires. One of them is the horn, and then the 2 are the airbag. And they're color-coded and keyed, so you can't screw up which one goes into the other one when you're putting it back in. Those little yellow clips are kind of a pain to get out, but once you do, they just snap right off. Then, I learned from my mistake on the last steering wheel episode. I got out the big impact wrench that I borrowed from my neighbor, and make sure that it's going the right way. And put a little bit of effort into it, and comes right off. Right. Now we need to take off those cables, and that's so we don't have to fish out all of the individual cables. We can just take it off as one that are connected up to that back plastic there. One of them came out really easy. The other one, not so much. So I'll grab that one in a second. Now we're going to grab the gear puller, and you'll see that my sacrificial 10mm nut is not on there. That's because on this one, the shaft that the steering bolt goes in, since it's actually a nut that goes on there as opposed to the last one on that KJ was a bolt that went in. This one actually has a divot to accept this jaw puller here, and it takes a little bit of finagling to get it into the right spot, and it takes me several attempts actually to get in there, but once you do, you should be able to let it sit, and it will sit there without having to hold it. And then you get out your wrench and crank it down. Now this one was really tight, and I'm not sure why this one was giving me so much trouble here, but a couple attempts, and finally I just decided to take a different route.
"12 seconds later."
Since I had the impact driver. I just got that back out, and although I don't have an impact rated for the 13mm there, wasn't going to be too big of a deal. Basically, I just needed it to give it a couple taps there. So I back it off, line it back up, and then turn it back to where I'm driving it forward, so that I know that it's going exactly the right way. And I get to a point where I just kind of lay into it, where I let it go and bang on it, and eventually it loosens it up. And I put the nut back on there so that it didn't fly back up at me. And now that it's going up like that, I know that it's up all the way up against the nut. And now I can take it off. Take that nut back off. And slide the steering wheel. It comes right off. Now I got to worry about that other little wire that wouldn't come out before. I grabbed just a really small screwdriver and come from behind. I'm doing a really good job of blocking it here, but you just got to push it into where that release of the clip is, and it slides out. And just like on the KJ, since I have access to this area, just spray some cleaner and wipe it all down. This vehicle has gone through several owners, and the owner who was before me was a teenage girl. So there was a lot of hair in here that I was digging out. So the one on the left is the one out of my Jeep, and the one on the right is the new one. Now you'll notice that there's a little bit of a notch there. That was because I pulled it off of my XJ, and the only thing I had to swap over was the wires. And that's the reason why I cautioned in the introduction about the year, because the wires are slightly different. It's only for the airbag, but I did need to swap over all of the connectors, all the wires, and that was a pretty easy task. And now I just got to put it back together. The steering wheel, just like all the other Jeeps, it's keyed, so only goes on one way. Put the nut on, and then I tighten it down by hand as opposed to the impact driver. And just like on the KJ, it'll come to a point where it stops naturally, and snug it up against there. Make sure you connect the cruise control wires and the radio control wires if you have them, and then plug in the airbag wires. And again, they are keyed and color coded, so you can't screw them up. You got to flip up that little plastic part, and I'll get a reverse angle here for you, a little bit easier to show. You just separate that little plastic part so it's raised, and then push it into place. Push that plastic part down, and it clicks into place. Reconnect the airbag, set it into place. Now putting the bolt back in is kind of a by feel. As you can see, I'm in front of the steering wheel doing this, so you just kind of got to feel how it goes in. I started with the passenger side of the steering wheel because it came out really easily, so I knew that one would go in. And if you look, you'll see that I have my reverse angle camera set up there, and that's for the reverse angle shot that I'm going to show you. But it actually helped me as well, because it gave me eyes on a spot that I don't normally have eyes on. And taking the socket and extension off of the wrench, I can get it into the hole and wiggle it around until it starts following the thread. And once it does actually start following the thread, I just check to make sure it's actually there. Then I can put the wrench back on and snug it all the way up. Alright, now it's all back together. The only thing that's left is reconnecting the battery, which I'm doing with that banging right there. The battery terminals were, or the connectors that go on the terminals were very, very snug, and better to have it really snug than really loose. So I just got out my rubber mallet and set them over the top and tapped it down into place and retightened the nut with the adjustable wrench. And once that's all done, come back into the vehicle. The first thing I'm going to do is just turn the key to the on position just to make sure that it works. Just to make sure that I have everything connected back up. And I do. And you'll be able to hear my horrible groaning sounds from the air conditioning system, or from the air system there, the vent, which is a very common issue for these Jeeps. So now that I've got it started, I wanted to start it so I could actually have the cruise control. I didn't know whether or not the cruise control light would light without it starting. So I'm testing out several things: the radio buttons, which the volume up and down works, and changing the presets work as well, which you can see on the right hand side of the screen. And then I'm going to check the cruise control to make sure that works, and it does, and I'll shade it so you can see it right there. And you can see it going on and off. I do that a couple times just to make sure. And if all of those work, then I count that as a success. So that's it for this. It's pretty easy. It's a pretty straightforward process. The only hiccups that I ran into was getting the actual steering wheel off. But again, if you have access to that impact wrench, sure does make it a lot quicker and a lot easier. Thanks for watching, everybody.